Everybody wants to write a competitive offer, especially in this marketplace. And we're seeing as is all the time. But what does that really mean? Illinois real estate contracts are very buyer friendly. They're loose. They're protected by attorney review. They're protected by mortgage contingency clauses. Everyone is utilizing the loopholes before earnest money goes hard, which almost runs concurrently into closing. So sending an as-is offer, it means about as much as the agent that's writing it. So what does the terms and conditions mean on an as-is offer, and what are you going to expect both as a buyer's agent and a listing agent? How do you make this really powerful versus just putting the document into the deal stack and making an as-is term in one of the line items on your email to the agent? There's more power to an as-is offer than just that info. What does it really mean to me? When I'm getting an as-is offer, I want to look at who the real estate broker is. What is their credibility in this marketplace? Have they ever done an as-is deal? Do I know them? Do I have confidence that they're going to get it to the finish line? And what does that look like? As a buyer's agent, I'm going to let that listing broker know as I go through all this info, what it's like to work with me on an as-is deal and what kind of credibility I have, and that we're not going to try and retrade this deal during attorney review, which most brokers do. So you get an as-is offer, and you're looking at this compared to people that aren't writing as-is offers. And you're like, this seems pretty good, right? Not always. A buyer is going to have an inspection. They're always going to have an inspection. And I encourage that, right? Who's going to write an offer on a, whatever, $500,000 property plus minus and go into it blind? Nobody. Let the buyer know what is happening with this property. All of our listings, we send the sellers a very detailed questionnaire asking for vintage of everything: roof, mechanicals, when you last did tuck pointing, updates in the kitchens, bathrooms. We want to know vintage. And what this does is it educates the buyer so they can't come back and retrade you during an as-is or after inspection. Hey, the roof's 10 years old. Yeah, we told you that during the purchase process. When you wrote your offer, you had the list of info that states all of the vintage on this property. So that's how you do a lot of front end research and get this as-is offer valid and more detail with a buyer and seller. So everyone's on the same page. They're going to find things in this inspection report, and your job is to get it to the finish line without repair credits and without request. There's going to be some, and I think some are valid, and we just got to figure out which ones they are and what they look like. So the as-is writer is going to have basically the content of, hey, we're buying this property in the condition that we've last seen it and what we're expecting. As a buyer's agent, make sure you're running through the house and using your skill set. You've already done a few home inspections with and tagged along on home inspectors. We've talked about what that looks like. Know what you're getting yourself into. Are we talking about a home that has a ton of old pipes, or are there new updated copper and PVC? What does this look like from a buyer's agent that has a ton of experience and credibility in the marketplace versus someone that's just kind of walking through with rainbows and unicorns, writing as is offer so their buyer can get a deal? And then all of a sudden you come to inspection and the buyer's like, Matt, why didn't you tell me this house was XYZ or the condition was XYZ? You have to take ownership as a buyer's broker and educate your client what it looks like to write an as-is offer. This doesn't mean you just go in and write it because it's a good thing to do. You have to be educated. So, and again, writing a as-is offer is only as good as the paper it's written on, right? You go and you get a warranty from a C-rated company that has poor reviews online. What do you think their customer service is going to be? It's going to be poor. So similarly with as-is, know your buyer, know your seller agent, know what you're doing. When a buyer writes an as-is offer and he gets it under contract, he has this inspection, the power shifts a little bit. So the buyer then feels like they have a little bit more power in the multiple offer situation because, one, they have the property under contract, and they know that the seller does not want to go back on the market. When a seller goes back on the market, it brings risks. Buyers are going to ask questions. Hey, you were on the market, you're under contract. Why'd you fall out of contract? Were there inspection issues? The seller is going to be anxious. Are we going to get the same price? There's a negative connotation to relisting a property. There just is. Most buyers and buyers agents know that, but if you're working with a good buyer's agent, they should also know that getting to the finish line is really important for their credibility, because you do run into the same people over and over. And you're going to remember, John Smith's the guy that keeps writing as is offers and bombs us on inspection. So understand that, yes, the power dynamic shift to the buyers once you're under contract a little bit. But if a seller holds firm, oftentimes the buyer is going to cave and go through the process. And honestly, sometimes if the buyer does ask for a couple $1,000 credit, sometimes as a seller, it's sad but true. Just throw a little money at the problem and get it to the closing table, so you don't have to go back on the market, so you don't have to fight the fight. You're going to go through the same inspection. You're probably going to have the same nonsense again, sadly, but true. So as is, what it should mean when you're submitting an offer. You as a broker have walked the property and understand the condition. The agent has sent you a detailed list. The list agent has sent you a detailed list of mechanicals, vintage, of almost everything that the seller has done to the property. And if they haven't, you should request that. An experienced listing broker should have that information. Everyone should know and be on the same page. You've examined every inch of this property. You're willing to purchase the property in the condition that it's in. You've educated your buyer what it means to be in an as-is situation. Yes, you can and you still should have that inspection, and barring any major mechanical or structural or unknown issues, you should move forward with this deal and try not to retrade during attorney review. So what are major issues? What do they look like? Structural, obviously. None of us are structural engineers. I always hate when anyone brings a structural engineer in, because no structural engineer is going to give you a stamp of approval on a property unless they do a coring, and there's just such a process with those people. So active leaks. If you're in attorney review and you have an as-is deal, there's an active leak. Maybe it's dripping under the sink you didn't see, or the toilet seal. It's okay to ask the seller to repair that. That could get worse quickly, or it could just continually just leak. It's a good thing for the seller to repair that. Don't be scared to ask for those type of issues. It's a win-win for everybody. Major mechanical. Let's say you saw the house and the air conditioning wasn't running, the heating wasn't running, and the disclosure said everything was active. It's okay if the seller is representing that everything in the house was working and it's not. You can ask for those items. If there's a sump pump that's failed, something that the seller literally doesn't know isn't working, it's be like, hey, this was represented in working condition, but it is not working. It is okay to ask for that. Roofs, you're going to most likely know what the roof looks like just from the street view. If not, again, please ask for vintage of what is going on and what this house has had done to it recently. Don't just go in blind, because you're going to have issues. Those are items that I think a savvy agent can ask for. We are not going to nickel and dime on anything else. If you know the furnace is 15 years old, every single inspector is going to say it's past its useful life. We don't care. Buy the property in the condition it's stated, because that's the who you want to be represented by. You want to have credibility in the marketplace. You want to have that type of rapport in the marketplace. Be that agent. A savvy agent will know what they're getting themselves into and explain it to their buyers. Part of the problem with the business is that we have so many untrained agents that are writing as is offers, and the warranty, like I said, is only as good as that agent that's writing it. If they don't know the process, make sure you're vetting that agent. Ask them the hard questions. Have you ever done an as is deal? Tell me an example of how you've gotten your buyer through an impasse when you've done an as is deal. Don't be scared to call the listing broker and put their feet to the fire. If you don't know them, that's your job as a listing broker, to get your seller the best deal, best terms, best conditions with the best agent and buyer possible. The buyer's agent should also take responsibility for an as-is deal. Educate. If you're not able to get your client past the situation, you're honestly not doing your job. You're going to get terminated, and you're going to be back on the street doing the same thing, fighting the fight with an as-is deal. So don't do that when you're in the situation that you're in and you've gotten the deal done for your buyer who definitely wants that house. You sometimes have to talk them off the ledge, and I've done that, and I've talked to a lot of brokers, some on this call, that have been in that situation. So writing the as-is rider, holding true to the terms, will give you a lot of credibility and confidence in the marketplace. You can discuss what this means for you and for agents involved. throughout this process, before you're even writing it, you can explain to them while you're touring homes. I appreciate you guys joining on this call. This is a really sensitive topic and something you guys should really understand. That is not just a piece of paper. That is your credibility on the line. And that is a deal that your client definitely wants to get done. So make sure you're doing your part. Any questions? Fire away, Dave.
Thanks, Matt. Regarding, let's say, mold and also radon, that's something that I've typically asked for, even though we went in as is, because we think it's a safety issue. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but that's also a disclosure issue. So your disclosures protect you in as is. If the seller says that there is no radon in the home and you get a radon test done and there's radon, someone's doing radon mitigation. That's a nominal cost also, right? I mean, radon mitigation these days is $1,000. Basically, if you guys don't know what radon mitigation means, they're going to go in the basement, they're going to core a hole 10, 15, 20 feet down, slide a piece of PVC on it, basically put a computer fan on it, vent that outside of the house. And basically what that does is it takes the radon gas underneath the home and vents it outside. 99% of the time, it's a $1,500 repair and you're done with one radon mitigation pipe, okay? Yes, you absolutely can ask for that. Mold, yeah, an unknown. If someone's going into the attic and you haven't been in the attic, because who goes in an attic as a buyer's agent, and the place is littered with mold, there's a bigger problem, right? There's probably a ventilation issue in the roof. It's probably not a huge remedy, to be honest. I mean, mold is such it's a harsh word for most buyers to absorb because they're like, oh my God, we're going to die. This house is full of mold. Every home has mold. There's an acceptable amount of mold that lives in all airborne particles, similar to radon. There's an acceptable amount of radon in all airborne particles. We just have to understand what that is and what their buyer's comfort level is. And if they're comfortable mitigating that mold and or radon. Some people are not. You have to be an educated broker and walk your buyer through that process. Most things don't scare me. And I try and talk to my clients about what it looks like to fix a problem. And that's what you have to understand. Hey, yeah, there's mold in this corner of the home. We're going to pull the drywall off. We're going to paint it with keels. It's going to cost you $1,000. Not a big deal.
And lastly, when it comes to the furnace and air conditioner, aren't those even protected by the seller on the 7.0 contract, saying as long as it's in working condition?
Agreed. Not necessarily on the contract, but they're stating in the disclosure, the real property disclosure, that there are functioning mechanicals in the home. If they're representing that the mechanicals are functional while you're writing an offer and you get to the inspection and then you're like, dude, your air conditioner doesn't work, you have to fix that. That's understandable. And maybe the seller hasn't turned the air conditioner on yet. They may not have known. So some of it if you're buying a home that's in foreclosure or short sale, there's going to be different situations because obviously the bank's going to be less, they're not going to be interested in making repairs. They'll just go to the next buyer. There's no emotion.
Okay, Matt, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for joining, guys. Appreciate it. Continue to fire away on your offers. I know it's tough out there. Use this as is video and educate the seller. If you're the buyer, let them know that you understand what as is means and you're going to hold to these terms. You've done all of the back end research to make sure that you're the right buyer for this property. See you guys.